How's it going, folks? I'm Cody Campbell with High Ground Gaming. Today we are unboxing and reviewing both the wired and wireless editions of the XPG Alpha Gaming Mouse. I'm going to start by walking you through the specs on both of these, then I'll open them up, let you take a look at what comes inside. After that, we'll go to the review portion where I'll give you my thoughts on them after having used them for a little while, and then we'll go to High Ground Gaming's final score. Stick around. So the wireless edition has three connectivity modes. It has 2.4G wireless, which is pretty much the fastest wireless connectivity out there, so that's pretty good. Then it has Bluetooth 5.1 if you'd prefer to use that, or you could use a wired connection using an included USB Type-C cable. It also has 60 hours of battery life. Other than that, these two are pretty much identical specs-wise. They both have a PAW3335 sensor with 1600 DPI. They both have an ergonomic design, Omron switches, which we've tested in the past and liked. They each have 6 programmable buttons, and they both have RGB, which can be controlled through the XPG Prime software. That's about it for the specs on these, though. Let's open them up. I'm going to start with the wired one. All right, we've got a quick start guide here with some stickers included, always nice. In the box, we've got a removable USB Type-C cable. Looks to be pretty long, a good 5-6 feet maybe. Now this is the wired edition, so there's no battery in here or anything like that, but having a removable USB cable is still pretty nice. It looks like there's a little ridge here that fits in this slot, which is good because that'll keep the cable nice and secure while you're whipping it around. The mouse itself is very, very light. I myself personally generally prefer a mouse with a little more weight to it than this, but it's nice. The cable is just a little stiff, I feel, for a mouse cable. I feel like you want a little bit more movement in here than what this one offers. There's a good tactility to the scroll wheel there. That feels good. Those Omron switches feel really nice. On the side, we can see 2 plastic buttons here, button in the center here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Underneath the mouse, we've got 3 skates, 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom, and 1 underneath the thumb. Feels like it's got a good slide to it. Again, I'm just struck by how sort of plasticky it feels. There's some good tactility on the edges there, but nothing about it feels particularly grippy or super premium. Let's see what the other one's like. Okay, same quick start guide, same stickers, same cable. And then inside we've got pretty much the same mouse. It is a little heavier. You can feel just a tiny bit more weight in this one than the wired version, probably because of the battery. The outer shell is pretty similar. We've got all the same buttons, pretty much feel the same. The edge there, same tactile design on the edges, but very smooth plastic on the top. On the bottom, we have the same 3 skates, but it is a little different here. There's a little compartment over here that contains the 2.4G dongle, so this is what you'll plug in if you want to use the 2.4G connection. There's also a little switch here which can switch between the 2.4G connection, off, which is only useful in wired mode, or Bluetooth. Looks like there's a little bit of a charge on here already, so we can see some of that lighting. So we've got the XPG logo lights up, the scroll wheel lights up, and then there's sort of an underlight that can be shown from sort of under the hood there. So these look pretty good from the outside, but I won't know for sure until I plug them in. I'm gonna go ahead and set them up at my computer. I'm gonna play some Halo Infinite, and we'll be right back with the review. Don't go anywhere. All right, folks, real quick before we get into the review, please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's start off by talking about the build quality on this thing. The overall ergonomic design is pretty comfortable. It fits nicely in the hand. You don't get a lot of fatigue or cramping or anything like that. The only kind of bummer is that the whole thing is just made of hard plastic. A lot of other mice in this general price range tend to have rubberized grips on the side, or maybe even some textured buttons and palm and stuff like that that just makes a more comfortable grip. As we mentioned before, it's extremely lightweight, which is going to be something that some people really love, other people hate. One really terrible aspect about it, though, is the cable. This thing is really not great. As you can see, it's very rigid. There's a lot of starch in it, and as we were using it, we noticed that it sort of fights you as you're moving the mouse around, and also even if you set the mouse down at a certain angle, the cable is starchy enough that it will actually move the mouse a little bit. It's really not pleasant. I was praising the mouse before for having those interlocking grooves and ridges so that it will stay in the mouse while you're using it, but that turned out to actually be something of a detriment. See, the ridges that fit in the grooves are on the mouse side, not on the cable side. If it was the other way around, it wouldn't really be an issue, but as it stands, if you try to use a cable that doesn't have these grooves, then the ridges will prevent you from being able to plug it in. That means you won't be able to use any sort of third-party USB Type-C cable with this mouse. So you can't replace it with a nicer, lighter one, you can't replace it with a longer one, and you can't replace it if anything ends up happening to this one, if it gets damaged or something like that. You're really just sort of stuck with it. But now let's move on to gaming performance, and that's really where this mouse shined. I played some Halo Infinite, and I found the mouse to be incredibly responsive the whole time I was playing. The Omron switches are really nice, very satisfying to click. The PAW3335 sensor offered a wide variety of speeds that you could customize and fine-tune, so really there was sort of a speed for everybody there, all the way up from 100 to the 16,000 DPI, which is plenty. There weren't a lot of connectivity issues either. Other than the cable itself not having the best build, it obviously worked great. USB Type-C is a very, very fast connection. Bluetooth is always gonna have a little bit of lag. Bluetooth is usually included as an option for you to switch to when you're in productivity mode. So you're browsing Facebook, or you're doing a report for school, or you're watching Netflix or whatever, keep the mouse in Bluetooth. But when you switch to gaming, you switch to the 2.4G because it's the much faster connection, but it drains the battery faster. And the 2.4G worked great. I did have a little bit of an issue where I was getting some dropped signals at first, but I realized that's because I was getting some interference from my headset, which was also using a 2.4G connection. So as soon as I unplugged the headset, I stopped having the issue altogether. Overall though, I found it to be comfortable, responsive, and perfectly adequate for FPS gaming. Now let's talk a little about the RGB and the XPG Prime software. First of all, this thing lets you have 3 different profiles to customize. There are 7 different lighting effects that let you control direction, brightness, and speed, as well as letting you control a little bit of the color spectrum. Anybody who watches my channel knows that that's a feature that I really enjoy. Unfortunately, the lighting effects that they offer aren't that great. There's the typical wave effect, there's the fade effect, and then there's a bunch of reactive effects. There's not a huge variety, and the ones that are there are sort of generic. And even with the ability to sort of adjust them to your preferences and stuff like that, there's still just not a lot. Then again, it is just a mouse. It's not a keyboard. It's not some big thing with tons and tons of RGB on it. So limited RGB options aren't that big of a deal. Max brightness on them is all right. It's not the brightest I've seen. It's not the dimmest I've seen. It does seem like the wired version is just a teensy bit brighter, which makes sense since it doesn't have a battery that the RGB is draining. On the more utilitarian side of things, there are 6 different sensitivity settings that you can use the center button here to cycle through, and you can change them using the software, so that's always a good tool to have. You can also set macros and key bindings on the mouse, which is useful particularly for the 2 on the side here if you want to use those for games. And for the wireless version, you can do some battery settings. You can set how long the mouse can stay inactive before it goes to sleep without you using it. And you can also set an alarm that will go off through the software to let you know when the mouse's battery is almost dead and how close to dead you want to let it get before you plug it back in. That's pretty much all the features though. Let's get down to the verdict. So because there are two different versions of this mouse, there are two different prices. The wired one comes in at $39.99, while the wireless edition comes in at $59.99. Let's start by talking about the wired. This one is kind of a hard sell for a couple different reasons. First of all, as we mentioned before, the cable. That's a big drawback, especially since you can't change it out, even though it is removable. Maybe it would break in over time and get less rigid, but it hasn't at all in the time that I've used it, and I can't guarantee it, and you really shouldn't have to put up with that level of frustration for any length of time. The other issue is that there's frankly just too much competition at that price point. The phenomenal Logitech G502 Hero is right around that price. That's my mouse that I use every day, and I love it. And I gotta say, both in terms of build quality and in terms of customization, it just blows this one out of the water. And if you're not a fan of that one, there's also the Razer Basilisk V2. That's a little bit cheaper than this mouse. There's really just not a great reason to buy the wired version. The wireless edition actually makes up the better value proposition of the two, even though it's more expensive. There honestly aren't a lot of ergonomic gaming mice that have a good sensor, good switches, and a 2.4G or faster connection. That puts this one in an interesting place because it makes it a good value option. So when we did the final score for these, we sort of split the difference between the two and gave it a 2.7 out of 5. This one, there's not a lot of great reasons to buy this one in our opinion. The wireless edition has a place in the market, we feel. It's a budget, no frills, fast connection, good performance wireless mouse. The cable sucks when you have to charge it, but if you charge it when you're not using it, that's not a big deal. Why don't you go ahead and drop down into the comments and let us know what you think. Do you think $60 is a good price for that? Or do you think the lack of features and the slightly worse build quality just make it so that even $60 seems a little too expensive? While you're at it, please hit the like and subscribe button. We've got lots more content coming real soon. We've even got another mouse review coming up in another couple weeks, so be sure to stick around for that if you're interested. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching. Happy gaming.